Hello, everyone, and welcome to another episode of the Atomic Podcast. The Atomic Podcast is dedicated really to a convergence of technologies, ideas, aspirations across the nanotechnology, AI, and quantum. These are obviously separate domains, one of expertise, of knowledge, and of product development, but they're also at the intersection I think of some of the most important innovations that are driving society forward, but also I think our economy and also new innovations to help us both across the life sciences and in other area of material development. So the Atomic Podcast, again, is really that place, that intersection that we all come together to really learn what those, I'll say that Cambrian explosion of technology is producing. So today, I also want to mention that we're in the Third Wheel podcast studios, which is really an awesome place. I just wanted to mention them because it's one of those professional podcast studios that you don't find very often. And here we are. And I'm super excited to introduce you to Nardo Manaloto. And he's a managing partner of Qubits Ventures. And Nardo's going to give some of his background and kind of what his journey is and has been to get to quantum, and really we're going to dig into quantum itself today, again, as part of that intersection of technologies and value propositions. So Nardo, thank you so much for being here, for making the drive in LA to be here.
Yeah, good to be here, Rodney. It's been a long time since I saw you, and I'm glad that you're doing something like this, and I think it's very timely. You know, we're talking about AI, quantum, explosion of technology, so glad to be here.
Fantastic. And so, one of the things, as we have known each other in at different touch points, I'm super interested in your journey that has brought you to Qubits to help give birth to Qubits, and then we can jump into quantum, your interest in quantum.
Okay, sure. So background-wise, I'm a computer scientist and 25 plus years in the healthcare industry, doing a lot of innovation in that space. Used to be part of Kaiser Permanente. And as a computer scientist, one area that I am quite good at is in the area of AI. I've actually built 6 AI products, 3 intelligent virtual avatars, medical devices with AI, machine vision systems, and things like that. So I'm one of those that normally pushes the innovation and emerging technology, not just to be a technology perspective, but more of an applied innovation that could be used for solving problems. So that's always been my perspective. And from the process of looking at AI, a good 4 years ago, I started looking into quantum machine learning. And what I found was, I said, oh my gosh, this is the kind of technology that would make such a big difference in the world. It is one of those meta technology that applies in all sectors. It applies to many different types of technology, especially if there's a combination of quantum and AI. And I said, let me see if I can start doing that. So in the process of doing that, I have a company that basically isn't a healthcare innovation ecosystems where we work with investors, technology companies, and helping them succeed and accelerate, and also corporate. So we know how to connect all of that. Through the work in AI, I started Qubits Ventures. Qubits Ventures was started about a year and 3 months ago with the promise of looking at the intersection of quantum and healthcare initially. And because the technology is so nascent, I started to expand the thesis of this venture fund to be more on sector agnostic quantum technologies and not just quantum computing. So I just wanted to make that clear. The usefulness of this from a technology standpoint is way bigger than just quantum computing alone.
Yeah, and I think you hit something really interesting because I think the wider public, when they hear quantum, their minds might go in different places, but they go into compute. They really think of quantum as computing. So maybe unpack a little bit some of those other applications and systems, and I'll say kind of translational technologies that help us get and use quantum.
Okay, sure. Yeah, this is a big education piece for me because trying to disambiguate between the two, all of a sudden, once you understand that, then all of a sudden you have a feel for how big the opportunities are and the challenges are as well. So let me tell you about quantum technology. So technologies, if you look at quantum, if you look at the old PC days, right? So before the PC ever came about, we had to develop chips, we had to develop transistors, we had to develop microelectronics, semiconductors, picks and shovels related stuff. And if you take a look at the entire technology stack, it's not just the hardware, it's also the embedded systems, the firmware, the software that runs it, the applications that goes on top of that, and all of the different things that control that, right? So technologies from a quantum perspective, there are the application pieces, which are things like quantum AI, quantum machine learning, that does optimization, cryptography, simulation, things of that nature. And then there's also what we call system software, right? So in order for quantum computing to actually happen, you need to have better programming tools. You need to have better operating systems. You need to have better utilities. You need to have better experience in how to develop. You need to have things like compilers and transpilers and things like that. We have so many different quantum machines now that in order for you to develop something, you have to learn many different quantum machine level of programming. So we want to change that experience, right? So we have editors and full enterprise platform that can create something once and then transpile it to many different machines. We also have what we call devices, right? So things like quantum sensors. So, when people say sensors, like, oh, wow, we have a lot of sensors, but this is like next level, next generation type of sensor with so much precision and accuracy that, and also generates a lot of data. So we have sensors, we have devices, we have things like optics and lasers. That's also part of this in the photonic space. So that area also needs to get funded. And then we have things like, quantum from a computing standpoint won't be here in full effect until maybe 7-10 years down the line, right? From a perspective of like 1 million qubits and stuff like that. But if you take a look at where we're already at what we call hybrid. So you could have classical architecture doing some algorithms in AI, and then you could do quantum machine learning and algorithm in a quantum machine and combine the results and outcome together. So that is hybrid computing. So that's also an area of interest. The other kind of more near term is what we call quantum inspired applications. So these are applications that are like quantum machine learning algorithms, but running inside the simulated classical physics environment, right? So we have the classical software already. NVIDIA has those, and we have many kinds of simulators out there where you could run these quantum machine learning algorithms inside, and those are actual solutions too. And then there are things that are, we need to connect these computers. We need to create distributed mechanisms for these quantum machines and these chips. Those are also part of building the entire quantum technology stack, and all of that are all opportunities.
And so when you kind of gave a really nice holistic view of some of the barriers, but also some of the opportunities. And so, but you started kind of beginning to outline some of the healthcare targets. And so are you still thinking healthcare as like a major area of benefit as quantum develops, or is it just sort of one area that will benefit among a whole, let's say thousands of other areas?
It will definitely benefit a lot of areas, but I feel like healthcare, life sciences, biotech, pharma devices are really going to be impacted. And I could give you multiple examples of those.
Are you thinking, like, when you think of pharma and biotech, are you thinking of drug discovery? Is that one area?
Drug discovery, drug repurposing, those are key areas. But if you take a look at a healthcare and pharma company, it's not just about clinical or pharma related stuff. Quantum can also impact the financial, the administrative, the logistics aspect of all these different companies, and they all have challenges in this area too, right? So, and I want to make sure that people also know that when they are looking at opportunities, it's not just about, when you're looking at healthcare, we're only looking at clinical. When you're looking at pharma, you're only looking at drug discovery, right? You have to look at the entire enterprise and what they struggle with, and they struggle with so many different things. A good example of an intersection would be in the logistics and supply chain area, In the healthcare space, it's hard to create supply chains for lab deliveries and drug deliveries, medication deliveries, and the whole last mile issue of making sure that you're optimizing for routes and delivery process and stuff like that, right? That is across the board. That's in pharma and other industries as well. So I want to make sure when you're looking at it from an industry perspective, there is the vertical aspect of the impact and there's the horizontal aspect of the impact.
Very interesting. And I think, again, some of these questions I'm delivering to you are trying to unpack some of the myths and some of the larger perceptions. So I would say a larger perception is that quantum is all about speed and scale. So it's about, increasing the delivery of a certain result. Is that true?
Yes, it is very much true because of the way quantum does things, right? It processes, the way it processes data, the way it solves for a problem is very different from a classical type computer. So thus the speed and thus the effectiveness of that, right? But you also have to expand your thinking. Quantum is also one of those that can be much more precise. In the area of sensing, right? So there's a lot of precision and accuracy that can happen in those kind of quantum effects, right? I think the other one is in the area of cybersecurity, encryption. Quantum encryption, if you're using post-quantum cryptography or quantum key distribution, it is deemed to be unhackable. Because the moment, just like any quantum principle, right? The moment you observe it, it actually collapses on itself. So thus, you can't hack a system that is quantum resistant and secure.
Very, very interesting. And are you seeing startups working in the cybersecurity space yet, or is it still too new for them to actually get their legs under them and move forward?
There are definitely, Rodney. There are definitely a lot of interesting companies out there that's working on both the PQC, post-quantum cryptography side, the quantum key distribution side, and also in the what we call quantum random number generation. A very good example of that is, I won't name names, but one very large mobile provider. They already have a quantum random number generation chip embedded inside of their mobile phones. So a big part of that is secure. The big use of that is securing the data in the phone and securing the transmission of data and stuff like that. So that's why, when people say, quantum is so far away, you have to look at it from a technology's perspective in order for you to appreciate a short-term, mid-term, and long-term view of the actual technology itself.
Yeah, and I think quantum is not unlike some other technologies that we're seeing. We saw that explosion of large language models. And although many of us in AI knew the Chat GPT-1, we worked with those kinds of models. But the idea, though, is when it gets to a tipping point, suddenly everyone starts to jump aboard and use, and also bring assumptions that may be accurate or not accurate. So one of the areas I wanted to ask you about accurate or inaccurate in quantum is, what are the, I'll say, low-hanging fruit that you see in the life sciences that you feel that quantum could apply over the next 3 to 4 years? Yeah, and is that, for example, I'm sorry, I'm jumping in on you, but is that also on sort of the level of atomistic simulation and or some other area?
Yeah, definitely in the area of drug discovery. I would say computational chemistry. So anything that is within the pharma side or the biotech side where you're computing chemistry, molecular type of scenarios and trying to look for the optimized problem and optimized solution, this could be used. In the area of you're trying to build new kinds of materials and new kinds of molecule structures, this could be used from an optimization simulation perspective. In some of the other areas, when it comes to quantum sensing, things like if you wanted to track particle flow, right, cell flow inside of the body, if you wanted to track neuronal flow inside of a brain, those are things that are possible within the quantum sensing realm. as well. And we already have companies that's already startups that are already here and putting these technologies inside of a healthcare institution. Not many of them yet, but they're already here. However, the development of these sensors has been like 10, 15 years. So the path is long, but in terms of now they're in the point of commercialization. It's not a myth. I'm seeing these companies. We still have a long ways to go because there's still a lot of gaps there. But I'm seeing a lot of solutions coming up.
That's interesting. So in a little bit overlap with quantum and material science, because as you say, like with sensor development, it can take a 10 or 15-year development cycle. Material science has always traditionally had that long cycle, and we're seeing that cycle starting to break down and become, in fact, much more accelerated, not just with quantum, but also with AI in general. So we want to be able, I think, across these technologies, we want to be able to experiment and yield results much more quickly, and trial and error is super important, but also trial and error with results that we can use is super important. So I want to ask this question, the trial and error question in regards to startups. So my idea of quantum is that it's capital intensive. It's a problem for big companies. Okay, I'm just saying the perception is. So I want you to tell me I'm wrong. And how and why am I wrong?
Yeah, I think that perception is because the first thing that comes to mind in quantum is computing, right? So that perception is very connected towards a hardware-based building a computer from beginning to end, right? So that is definitely very, very cost prohibitive, right? So if you're not a big tech company and things like that. However, you have to also look at how companies do the roadmap. Let me give you an example. There was one company that I invested in. They're in the room temperature quantum photonics space. They're building a quantum computer using photonics technology, which is light technology. And when you take a look at that and say, "Oh my gosh, that's going to be a very capital intensive type of funding scenario, right?" But when you start learning about what their short-term, mid-term, and long-term approach towards building a quantum computer, you would find out that they do have an approach that is much more cost-friendly to build their initial part of their product. And so as they build their product, they could actually market some of the solutions that they're building on the way towards a full-blown quantum computer. So that's one scenario. The other scenario is you have to look at from a technologies perspective, just like in anything that we're doing with AI, right? To build the next generation NVIDIA is going to be costly, but to build an application that runs on top of NVIDIA that is a software that could be used for solving a problem. For example, quantum machine learning for material science that's built on top of NVIDIA hybrid software that has NVIDIA GPU and QPU. That is an investable company as well. So the software side of things is much easier as always, and that is less costly as well. And then there are other technologies that's part of this. Things like if I needed to build a photon detector, right? In a quantum computer, there's always photonics in there. And a lot of people don't know that. So those photon detectors are just one piece of a component that has a market as well. So that is something that could be marketed, could be developed, and it's not as costly as a full-blown quantum computer.
Just for the audience, but also a photon identifier in this case would do what? So, why is it helpful, and for what reason?
Yeah, so basically a photon detector, it's saying, okay, in order for you to process something, right, it basically says, okay, let me put this photon through. It will carry some information, and somebody needs to detect that. Something needs to detect that. So photon detectors are used for that purposes. It is the carrier of information. It's also used as a way to not just detect, but also to manipulate light. And to manipulate light, so there are things like lasers, and there are so many different areas in the optics space that would help you do that.
Very, very interesting. I want to kind of keep circling around atomistic simulation and simulation in general in quantum. Sort of a sweet spot for me. But I want to know perhaps more clearly what are some of the benefits of quantum in terms of manipulation of atoms and gaining some, I'll say, both accuracy across perhaps time series, accuracy in terms of results, so that if you're scaling, whether it's materials or other things, you're actually starting at a baseline that's far more, I'll say, much just in a way more precise and more accurate. So as you go in a way upstream, as you scale, you're able then to capture all those different levels from an atom per atom point of view. But that takes an enormous amount of compute, as you know, per atom. So is quantum really that one of those solutions that can really give us that kind of control on an atom level? Is this sort of the magic, or say the silver bullet in a sense?
Silver bullet to be seen, but based on what I've seen on the different approaches to how a quantum computer tackles problem, it's very different, right? So in our classical AI system, the way we do things, it's really deterministic. It's either this or that, and the issue with that is you have to find so many this and that in order for you to have a full list of things that could be done, right? So the whole trial and error process is very lengthy. So that's one. And it takes a lot of different steps because you're trying to solve a probabilistic problem with a deterministic machine, right?
Yes.
So quantum is a probabilistic system. Right? It's based on, hey, let me take a look at, from the most optimized problem to the least optimized, and basically say it'll rank it in terms of all of this different rankings, right? So to me, that speeds it up, and it solves it in such a natural way that because the architecture itself and the way it does it is suited for that. So that's why, I think of it as like, I remember when I was a kid, Rodney, when I used to solve these New York Times mazes, and say, okay, this mouse need to go to that cheese, right? So I used to solve it like, okay, let me find the single path. That is our existing classical system, right? So the new quantum machines are basically, let me take a look at that maze, and then let me look at all of the different options simultaneously, and then give you all of the optimized problems. Here are all the optimized path towards. So you actually remove a lot of the trial and error aspect by looking at all of these optimized path in a more I would say at least it's presented to you. The solutions are presented to you from the best solution to the lowest solution.
I mean, you're outlining very nicely this sort of limits of Newtonian thinking versus quantum thinking. We were talking about this before the podcast a little bit, but one of the interests that I have, and I think others in quantum, is how do you scale? And what are the barriers when you're trying to scale, across, qubits? And is it just building upon what you started with, or is there some fundamental property changes that go into scaling? I know in the material science and nano, as well as AI, we can't think of scale always as like, that's just times two. So tell me a little, maybe some of the journeys and thoughts you have on scale.
Oh, yeah. I mean, this is a very big issue in the quantum machine. That's why we're limited right now in making good use of it, right? One area is what we call decoherence. So decoherence is basically the qubit itself is losing signal strength, right? Or capability to do the compute, right? So that's the decoherence aspect. The other one is what we call errors. Qubits are so sensitive that all environmental things and noise it picks up and basically degrades the signal, right? So error correction is a big thing, and there's nothing out there that basically says I'm 100% error free. Everything that we have from a quantum machine perspective and all the stuff that it computes for is very, very error. There's a lot of errors that comes out of that. So errors and decoherence are the two main area. And then the other part of it is like there's also so many different types of quantum machines, right? There are some that are diamond-based. There are some that are superconducting qubit. There are some that are photonic. Some are topological qubits. Some are spin qubits. There's so many different types. Some are ion traps and things like that. So although they have, atomic particles and particles in common as part of that, just because they're part of the quantum scale, but that doesn't mean that everything is equal in terms of problem solving. With everything nascent, there's a lot of standards to be also thought about. We're not even thinking about standards right now. We're just thinking about, okay, how do we make the science work? How do we define what qubit is? How do we define errors? How do we define volumes? There are things that are just being in the definition stage. So before we get into standards, that's one. So that's the science and technology aspect and standard aspect of it. So let's say we get that all done, right? So some of the issues with scaling a quantum computer company is just the supply chain itself. So the supply chain, if you take a look at the technology stack, there are new kinds of components and things that are not commercially available. There are a lot of commercially available supplies that's already there. That's part of a quantum computer, but there are also stuff that are not, right? Because they're still being built. They're part of the differentiation of what a quantum computer is. So the question is, who's going to be building these companies that will generate a lot of the need for the supply chain aspect. That's a big gap, a lot of opportunities there. The other gap is like from a quantum is a critical technology across all countries, right? And what's going to happen is, we already see this in the component market, semiconductor market. Supply chains are eventually going to silo out into by country itself when it comes to quantum. And here in the U.S., look at our supply chain. We're very reliant on companies in Taiwan, companies in Europe that can help, that provides all these chipsets and capabilities. We have to start building here in the U.S. So that is in my perspective, one of the major hindrance. And then it's also a major hindrance for any kind of quantum startups that's coming outside of the U.S. and also wants to scale up in the U.S. So they are also part of the pipeline for this quantum supply chain portion of it. And until we also mature that piece and somebody needs to invest on that area, I think we have a long way to go there.
So these barriers are to some degree geopolitical, competitive, kind of driven by nationalism in a sense, and also driven by real need, supply chain need, right? So when you say silo out, what you're really saying is that the components that help to build the quantum compute and other quantum devices will become more state-based? Is that what you're saying?
Country-based.
That's what I mean, like country-based.
Yeah, it'll be country-based.
Yeah. And you're seeing that movement already, or are you seeing that's kind of a future movement?
I'm seeing bits and pieces of it already, especially in the, for example, like we have export controls here. That's the CFIUS Act. In that area, I'm seeing a lot more tightening, even impacting the venture capital world.
Interesting. And how do you think that affects standardization? If I'm building components and you're building components and the next country is building components, how do standards reach across international lines?
Yeah, the hope that I have there, Rodney, is, there is a country geopolitical view, but there's also the research education view, right? So for the good of the world, right, type of scenario. So standardization is, I think, one of those areas that hopefully we could count on for our researchers and developers and academia to put together. For everyone's benefit. I think the geopolitical view is more on, okay, the country that has the best quantum computer will have the quantum advantage.
And they will drive standards?
They will drive their own standards, but depending on how many how many quantum computing types there are. It's very different from the classical architecture. I think right now we only have we have the NVIDIAs, we have the ARMs, and we have the Intels, right? We only have three major companies that are really developing chipsets. In this world, there are so many different companies, small companies developing quantum chipsets, quantum ASICs, different types of quantum computers. So it's even more varied compared to the classical realm.
Very, very interesting. And the race to building this infrastructure, quantum infrastructure and quantum compute and devices is on, would you say?
It's been on for a while.
Right. And tell me a little bit more about the investment community, because you're right in that intersection, at Qubits Ventures. How do you kind of encourage the sort of I'll say combination of corporate entrepreneurs and investors all coming together to sort of both fund but support these ventures? How is that happen? Or how is it happening?
Yeah. First is I certainly do a lot of education, right? Because a lot of corporations don't even know, they know, but they actually don't know the intersection of their industry and this space. And we're getting much better at it. When I first started it, there's definitely a lot more. But now, I think there's a lot of quantum events and conferences that are happening, and people are starting to realize that this is one of those critical technologies that every country needs to be investing in. I think last count, there are about 23 different countries that have strategic directions when it comes to quantum. Because of that, then, now there's also things here in the U.S. like the National Quantum Initiative. That was signed by President Biden way back in 2018. That basically said the U.S. is investing $1.2 billion into the National Strategic Initiative to spur innovation in this space and to start using this technology or figuring out how to use this technology. And then we also have the Quantum Cybersecurity Act. That also came out, right? So that one is more of a call to action to start using quantum resistant and hopefully unhackable type of encryption and key distribution to help the enterprise get into to mandate almost for the enterprise to become quantum resistant, quantum secure. So that piece of it is coming. Right? That piece of it is coming. And then the other one that just came out last year is the CHIPS Act. So the CHIPS Act is basically said, okay, we want to create our own chips here and supply and manufacturing here in the U.S. So there's a lot of money being poured into that. Because of all of that, of all that activity, enterprises are, cluing in. Oh, quantum is going to be a very critical technology for us as well. What's happening is, even on my end, I'm doing a lot of education. Corporations are investing into my fund as well. So from that standpoint, that if they want access to my community of quantum scientists and engineers, and they want ability to see what's going on from this space and ability to do due diligence, they could always partner with me, and I can tell them how.
But may I ask a certain type of corporation? Do you see Kaiser or large, health systems? Are they also putting some of their money down for this future?
Yeah,
because they're very risk adverse. Most of your larger systems are.
Yeah, let me give you an interesting example. So I don't know if you saw the article recently released or the press release. So Cleveland Clinic bought their own quantum computer. So they spent a lot of money to basically bring in a quantum computer inside of Cleveland Clinic. So the whole premise of it is like, okay, well, we have to explore this technology. And believe, you and I have been connected for a while, Rodney, and healthcare. Healthcare is so conservative, so change adverse and stuff like that, right? But here they are, right? They're making investment in that space. And companies like Kaiser, I do know that they're doing something in this area as well.
That's very hopeful, by the way.
Yeah.
I mean, out of all the different sort of sectors of the economy, to know that healthcare is taking a bet here is really great.
Yeah, and even there's even a spin-off company coming out of insurance companies that are in the payer side of things, spinning out quantum machine learning companies looking at medical records and things like that.
Interesting.
Yeah.
Interesting. Let's look at the flip side of this if I can. Okay, so you've been talking about the technology, the innovation side, some of the investor organizational sides, competitive, geopolitical. These are all super important. We often focus on technology as like the opportunity and barrier, and it's a lot of other areas. I'm super interested in if a company that has resources, and let's say they're very AI centric, they really understand their algorithms and how to build out pipeline and data engineering and go into operations and with very robust algorithms that choose not to go down the quantum route. What are they going to be losing out on?
Well, they're definitely going to be losing out on faster speed to problem solving. They're going to be losing out on that. Certainly. They're going to be losing out on innovations on things that they've never seen before, right? Solutions that they've never seen before. They'll be losing out in new kinds of data capture. For example, if you have a quantum sensors that's generating much more data. Let me think about the existing quantum sensor for the brain, EEG, right? So we have solutions that's doing a lot of AI in that area already. But if you take a look at a quantum sensor that is generating much more data to the point of tracing the path of one neuronal spark across your brain, that is stuff that we've never seen before. So, but that also means there's a lot of data that goes along with that, right? So that also means now we're getting into territory that even our physicians don't know about.
Right.
It also means that now we have to get into next level of translational medicine. So there's a lot of great things, but there's a lot of unknowns, and we also have to figure out all of that stuff in between.
So you talk about speed here, but the more interesting part, I think, is that you're talking about a realm of both data and knowledge that we just won't have. Right? Or companies won't have. Can maybe you will make a slight pivot into large language models and ChatGPT kind of things, okay? Just for a moment. I'm sorry to bore you on this.
Oh, no worries. I love this stuff too. So remember, I have an AI background.
Yeah. So. No, but I mean, it's so much like a huge flood in just about every social media moment. But I am really interested in this notion of startups and scale and data. And what I mean by that is that one of the advantages of quantum that I've seen is the ability to capture and make sense of and compute large amounts of data, diverse data, and so does that sort of lead quantum to sort of tie itself to large language models? And is that an area of development as well?
Yeah. So quantum and AI, I consider them as like soulmates, yeah, right? So they're such a natural pair, right? So because they align with each other. The way quantum solves things, the way quantum processes things, it's very suited towards how AI was meant to be, right? So yes, they're pretty much a pair. There's quantum machine learning. That's one side of things. But I also wanted to point out that AI can also help quantum. So it's not just quantum to AI, but AI to quantum as well. So for example, there was a time, pretty recent actually, where the NIST was looking at, here are the new kind of post-quantum cryptography algorithms that we're going to deploy for, because of this Cybersecurity Act, right? But, from that standpoint, when you test it with quantum, it's secure, but AI was able to crack it. Right? So AI was able to crack that algorithm. So that means like the AI, quantum is great at processing, but it's not the smartness. Right? AI is the smartness. So if you pair them together, smart processing at speed, right? So it's a very good combination, but it can also be a dangerous combination.
Yeah, sure, very much.
Right.
Yeah, and I'm super interested in, as you've circled around cybersecurity, is that are you finding that cybersecurity, it also has multiple applications, right? Benefits. If you were to wave your wand a little bit from a societal standpoint and say, these are my top areas I think quantum would benefit society more generally, will have that societal impact. Where in 5 or 10 years do you see that impact, I'll say, at its greatest value?
Yeah, definitely on the security side, definitely a big interest, just because healthcare is the biggest, the industry is number one in healthcare in data breaches. Okay, so and the moment you secure things, then you're free to kind of do a little bit more, exchange data. So the whole societal change for how things are done, because everything is secure, to me, that's really a very positive thing, right? So because now you're no longer constrained by, somebody trying to hack you and then, they get your data and things like that. So security is one thing, and it's already here. There's a lot of companies that are doing this kind of stuff already. Quantum sensing is another one, because quantum sensors, if you take a look at the sensor market and all of the different things it applies to, it has impact to healthcare, it has impact to agriculture, it has impact to climate change, oil and gas, energy. It impacts all of these different industries. So quantum sensors is one of my favorite area as well. So I think, to me, it's here, but it just depends on what you're trying to build, right? So we already have startups that are building things for healthcare, for mining, for energy, agriculture, and things in those industries. That's also an area. The other one is what I call the quantum communications or quantum internet. We have companies that are already putting those together, and it's a very hard problem to solve, but we know that things are happening there. It also is key for when it comes to quantum communication, to secure communication, because that's also a security thing, right? So if we can secure space, if we can secure all of the communications across our country, across our across all the different communication mediums, then it's a good thing, right? But our existing quantum networks and internet and communication has distance limitations. It can only do certain distances. So we have a lot of work to get done there. So that's another area that I'm very interested in. Anything on the chemistry side, computational chemistry, and just like you, computational chemistry and the application towards material science.
Web 3.0. I'm sorry, I'm going down a little bit of a banquet here of topics, but there's often claims that we can use blockchain, and I mean, I've seen it. We all know blockchain can be quite secure in terms of authentication. So I know who touched what when. I have a sense of provenance when something originated. So being able then to identify, like, fake news or fake information becomes something that, blockchain is pretty decent at. Of course, it's still evolving too. Is there an intersection between blockchain technologies and quantum?
Yeah. I've seen intersection in creating a quantum resistant blockchain.
A quantum resistant?
Yeah.
Oh.
So meaning it's hardened by post-quantum cryptography. Right. So because our existing blockchain, although it's good with, looking at transactions from a perspective of history and the ability for you not to question the transaction and security from that standpoint, but it's still not secure. Right. It's still not secure because it's part of the whole classical architecture of just the RSA. A big enough quantum machine can eventually crack RSA. So that's why there's such a big imperative to do post-quantum cryptography, cybersecurity in this space, because it's just a matter of time. So anything that's on the classical things that's been done on the classical stuff with existing classical RSA encryption will eventually get cracked.
And in your company, Are you seeing an increase in startups coming to you with new ideas? And what stages do they come to you?
Awesome question. They come in many different stages, but a lot of them are coming from academia. And because the kind of people that are doing these things are scientists, quantum physicists, like have deep background in this space because this is very hard science. So I see that coming out of universities. Some of them have not even incorporated yet. They're still thinking, hey, I have this IP. I want to get it commercialized and go through that process. I have companies that have already incorporated and in the pre-seed level said, okay, this is what I have. I have a prototype I'd like to show you. I have companies like that too. I have companies that are moved on and basically said, okay, I've done quantum machine algorithms and I have a couple of clients that are I'm serving and have moved on to more of a seed level. So I see pretty much across the board. There are also more mature growth companies as well, but I hardly look at that from a perspective of the fund because my fund is on I only invest in pre-seed and seed level quantum startups.
And are you seeing, say, like the IBMs of the world, kind of starting their own like little incubators? And in other words, the R&D is being, I'll say, pivoting over from other interest areas to quantum?
Yeah, IBM is one of the big supporter of quantum, right? So they're building their superconducting quantum computer that in which I think they're at 433 qubits at this point. They have a large ecosystem. They even have a program for early stage companies that are using IBM quantum supercomputer to build products and solutions on, and some of them are. I'm not exactly sure whether they do invest in these companies, but I do know that they provide quite a bit of support in this area.
And NVIDIA?
NVIDIA is the same. NVIDIA is a little bit more thoughtful about how they're doing things, right? So the way NVIDIA did things is they're strong on the GPU side. Mm-hmm. And, that initially I was thinking, oh, maybe they're going to build their own quantum chip, right? So, and the more I tracked them, what happened was they partnered with a quantum computing company to create a hybrid server. So now there's a server out there that's NVIDIA. That's a partnership between NVIDIA and a quantum computing company, all into one solution, right? So to me, that's an indication that maybe NVIDIA's interest in quantum is there, except the way they're going about doing it is not necessarily building their own, but maybe acquiring.
Makes sense. NVIDIA is one of those companies that remarkably is super large and diversified, but also continues to, I think, amaze us and how it stays not a step ahead, but a further step ahead. So I'm glad that you mentioned both IBM and NVIDIA. Are there other large companies that you see that are benefiting the development path of quantum that one could benefit smaller companies or startups, or do you feel that they are in the game to conquer the market? I mean, you never know those things, but I just want to know like who. Maybe it's IBM, maybe it's NVIDIA, maybe some other companies that are there to really support the community. And then one other question to that, are there associations, quantum associations that are there, like NIST is in material science, to support the quantum community?
Yeah, all good questions, Rodney. In terms of big tech, you know about Google, right? So Google spun off their quantum group. There's a big quantum group now called Sandbox AQ. So they're doing a lot of stuff in cybersecurity. So they're more of a, they're definitely more of a. I see them as a full stack eventually on quantum. So that's one big tech. But you also have to look at industries. Right, pharma is a big supporter. I would say 80% of pharma is looking into this quantum, and some of them are doing proof of concept work already for a while. Right, so pharma is one. Healthcare is starting to get into it. But pharma and finance are two industries that are big companies, that are going there. JP Morgan, Goldman Sachs, these are large institutions that have a need for this level of capability, right? So I'm seeing both the big tech support and I'm seeing the industry support on the large enterprise as well. So those are a great indication. And then one of the we have a consortium out there called the QEDC, Quantum Economic Consortium or Development Consortium. They are, I would say they're the best consortium to join if you are an enterprise, you're a startup. They are pretty much connecting everyone in this area. They're doing a lot of education. They're doing a lot of connection. They're doing a lot of events and conferences. So they are definitely the ones that are, I would say, the de facto organization to go for.
Mm-hmm. And are they also an organization that's looking into standards? Or are they there really to support the community strictly at this point?
I think at this point, there's talk about standards there, but I think it's more of in support of other standards bodies like the NIST and things like that. But they're not the ones who's actually the flag bearer for that, right? So they're more of community resources, marketplace, making the connection happen and making the connections happen in order for standards to happen, in order for adoption to happen. So I see them more from that standpoint.
You make me think about kind of 2011 or 10, and I don't think it's a direct comparison, but I think of deep learning, and then some of the explosion in deep learning, Jeffrey Hinton's lab and ImageNet and some additional compute. And then like the factors came together to move deep learning to really be the driver and for a while of what we thought AI was, and but it was academic, compute, access to data, access to expertise, and then the sort of industry willingness to fund, I should say, the venture interest to fund startups so that they could get traction. And it feels like quantum, I don't know if it's the same timeline, but it feels like those factors are congealing at this point with quantum.
Yeah, I think AI has a lot to do with it, right? Because AI have traversed all these issues of where quantum can actually play. Remember that quantum and AI are a good pair. Right. So, and in order for quantum to solve some stuff, it's not just about faster processing. It's about, okay, well, what is out there that can help, that I can help solve in a much better manner. Right. So AI did all of that stuff. So that's why when I look at quantum in this industry and how it's developing in a more faster progress, mainly because of how AI came about. Right. So, and all the stuff that's happening there. However, we haven't seen, at least really the best proof of what a quantum advantage is, meaning a problem that a quantum computer can solve that a classical system cannot. So we're not, there are some hints on where that could be, but whether it's I would say whether it's like a credible type of evidence that it is quantum advantage, I think we still have some work there.
And do you see other investors like yourself reaching across applications, systems, and opportunities to cultivate startups? Do you feel you're a person screaming in the desert? Or how are you seeing the investment trends today? Investment trends is definitely on the quantum side is getting much better, right? In the past, sometimes I did feel like, oh, I'm the lone wolf crying, right? So shouting out and saying, hey, take a look at me. But that has definitely gotten better. If you take a look at the number of investors investing in quantum companies, in the US, I think I'm the only one that's doing specializing in quantum investment. But we have a lot of deep tech VC firms that are investing in quantum as well. If you take a look at other countries, they have their own specific quantum funds investing in quantum technology companies. So I'm seeing a lot more of that happen. And the good thing about specializing in this area is I can do the due diligence and I could share it with any deep tech ventures who's interested in co-investing in quantum companies.
And from that standpoint, I do help support the growth of that investment ecosystem for these startups. So it's getting a little bit more common. The education aspect of it is getting much better. Before, I had to talk about this. Have people even heard of the word quantum, right? And then the second question is like, well, what does quantum mean, right? So in layman's term. So there's a lot of that stuff. I think a lot of people are already seeing, where it could contribute.
And are you finding that those conversations now are coming? I'll say those conversations that are educational really are bearing fruit in terms of, like you said, investors co-investing. So in other words, there's a long road to education to actually get action sometimes, but you're seeing that between education to action much shorter now. That's what I'm hearing.
Yeah. Much shorter, mainly because they're looking at this and say, okay, gosh, a lot of organizations are interested in competitiveness, being market competitive. They want to be the best at something. They want to be world class at something. And they're seeing this technology as one of the critical technologies that can bring them that. So the need to be prepared for it, the need to ready their workforce for it. We do have a workforce issue as well because, there's not so many quantum scientists out there, as you probably already know, right? So, and there are workforce that we need to retrain and train. So there's a lot of readiness component. There are companies that that's in the enterprise platform for developing these solutions that are also helping out. They're doing a lot of proof of concept with large organizations, and that's giving a lot of visibility in terms of what this technology can do and cannot do.
Advice to, say, a group of scientists, entrepreneurs that have come together to start a quantum startup. What are some of the points you would give them that would, improve their, their points towards success, give them some leg up, so to speak?
Yeah. So especially in a deep science type of startup, the normal people that would start it are quantum physicists, scientists, engineers, and they love doing their stuff. They like to be deep in that area. But, when you build a startup, it's never just about the technology, the science, and the product, right? Rodney, you have to take care of the business. At the end of the day, investors invest in businesses, right? We invest in businesses, and we want to make sure that the product is also solving something. It's not just, for the sake of technology. So I think the pairing of business people, operations people, operators, in the startup space, entrepreneur, paired with, really very smart scientists, is always a combination. But sometimes that is a little bit of an afterthought. So I think, maybe at the very beginning, think about forming the company as a business. With good technology, good science that can help solve a problem, and make all of that align, and the alignment of the kinds of different people to make it successful is there.
So when you look at companies coming to you, you look at that team mix. You look at what problem or problems they're solving and what kind of impact the technology will have, correct? Yeah.
Yeah, I look at the alignment because, for example, there are some companies that are trying to build a quantum computer, and a lot of the people building it are, doesn't really fully align in terms of experience. There are some alignment, but so when I look at that, at the end of the day, it's the key is execution. Is this a group of people that can execute in building the science and the technology to make something happen, right? So I always look at the execution aspect of it and the path towards execution from all different angles of a startup.
So what is your advice, if I can ask this question, to, say, a young scientist or perhaps a postdoc, a doc that comes out and says, I'm going to start my quantum company? You answered it mostly, but I'm just saying. Or someone that's even in their education thinking towards quantum. Any thoughts about not so much what they would learn, but kind of how they learn and move forward to arrive at a place that it is going to be this quantum age?
Yeah. So I think if you are thinking about creating a startup, you need to explore the areas that you don't know about. If you're a quantum scientist and you're good at building, devices and chips and components, but you don't know the market that it goes for, be educated about that market. If you don't know what startup business is all about, get educated as to what startups are all about. If you don't know how to operate a business, get educated on, business finance. And if you don't know what venture investment is all about, get educated on that. Because at the end of the day, a startup has very limited resources and they have to learn many different facets of the business in order to be successful. Because if the people that are not only aligned, but are cross-functional, and can help support each other because they're learning together on this stuff and they're not bounded by just, I'm just doing this. I think it's a better position for a startup. So it's always good to learn about stuff that you don't know. All right. That's a typical scientist and researcher. So just don't learn about the stuff you already know. Learn about the stuff that you don't know in order to build a good quantum startup.
I think it's super great advice to anyone building a startup, but I think it's good life advice. Mm-hmm. Don't focus on your strong points, but try to sort of ramp up your weaker points. Really understand. Nardo, I just want to thank you. This has been not only insightful, but I've learned a ton, in both listening to you and speaking with you. So I want to thank you for the time and thank you for your generosity in being here.
Oh, glad to be here, Ronnie. It's great to see you. Great to see that you're doing this. And I do appreciate the support in, making something happen in the quantum ecosystem.
Awesome. Thanks again, Nardo. Take care.